Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back. So here's my review for episode 4. I just watched the episode and actually I was not expecting what we got here. The crazy battle scene that happened in this episode actually caught me by surprise because I was kind of expecting that to maybe be like episode 5 or 6 or something like that. But no, it actually happens in this episode. And so yeah, I do want to get into everything here. So before we go any further, make sure to be a subscriber if you do want to get all my Walking Dead content like this. Now, this episode really focused a lot on Roberto being upset that Justina was gone, right? And I think this episode overall, was a decent episode. I actually liked a lot of the battle scenes and everything. I think the pacing towards the end was a little bit off. I will say I definitely didn't like how everything sort of played out at the end, but I do like that this episode was a lot longer than I guess normal, right? And they actually did get into a lot of that stuff. I think that that's the one thing when it comes to this episode is that I like the fact that it felt like it was almost 2 episodes because the battle sequence was pretty long. And, there's a couple of things with the battle that I will say, I think worked really well. It was really cool to see a battle actually, happen for that long. I do think that it probably was one of the longest battle sequences they've ever done. I will say I kind of timed it. I feel like it was 15 to 20 minutes. And so I don't know if this is what was referenced in the early reviews about a 30-minute battle or something like that, but that's not what this was here. This was definitely more like 15 to 20 minutes, which is still, a really long battle sequence. And I think that the way most of it played out here, it was actually really great, and I was a huge fan of it. But there's a couple things throughout the battle that I found a little interesting because it just didn't really make sense that some of the things were happening, or it was I'll get into it once we get there. This episode, though, obviously, like I was saying, really focused on Roberto being upset that Justina was gone, and Fede was really upset that he broke his promise to Justina's father of, keeping her safe and whatnot, and that was really a big theme of the episode here, was Roberto was just obviously we need to save her, and Fede was like, well, what do we do now? And, I do like the fact that that was the theme of the episode, because I think that that's sort of how everyone's feeling about the situation. And there's 3 episodes left, and it's kind of cool. By the end of the episode, I'm not really in a place where I'm fully believing that Daryl is still wanting to help out. He's helping out in certain situations because he's there, and he's well, I guess we have to do this. We can't just leave them there, right? But he's not so committed to the people there, right? And Carol kind of is. So I think Carol's reactions to a lot of the people that she's meeting is very similar to Daryl's reaction, I guess in season 1 when he first met a lot of the people in France. I think it's just, you want to help out, you're trying to survive this and that, you feel really bad, and you feel like you should just help out. Although I will say with Daryl in season 1, it was more, he helped out Laurent because he had to, because he wanted to get back home. Then eventually he started to actually be you know what, I want to keep him safe. And then the whole Isabel thing happened, right? And so this episode really dealt with a lot of that. It was just we're repairing the boat and that's awesome, but, I just want to go home, and that's pretty much it. And Carol, obviously, we see her a lot in this episode, just we should go and help them. And we also learn that Roberto wants to leave as well, but, he's not going to go to America if Justina's not there. So he's just yeah, I'm not going now. And so I do like the fact that a lot of the Carol versus Daryl stuff, there's a boat scene actually that I do want to talk about. This scene I thought was actually really well done, because Carol is just saying this and that, I wish that, we could do more of this or that or whatever. And Daryl's just disagreeing. And I feel the characters are just so good at the dialogue and just communicating and everything in a scene. It just felt like that's who the characters were. Carol is just she's not scared to say anything to Daryl. And Daryl is also he's not going to get frustrated with Carol, even though, obviously he might, but he's going to accept everything that she says. And so Carol's just saying this and that. And you can tell Daryl's getting a little upset by things and even gets mad and kind of storms off a little bit. A lot of what happened with Isabel, I think we're going to learn, throughout this season or by the end of the season that, it's still affecting him a lot. And he doesn't like the fact that, he actually let himself, I guess, go to a place like that. And I do think that that is, affecting a lot of his decision making here. And that's why he does want to leave. He got sort of, involved in that whole storyline there in France. And then it just ended really badly. So I feel like now he's just like, you know what? I'm done. I want to go home. The Carol and Daryl thing I thought was kind of a hilarious moment as well. Like when she was like, oh, like she thought that they were together or whatever. And Carol and Daryl like, no. Because it's kind of a fun nod because obviously that is something that, you know, some people have wanted for a very long time. But just to give like a little nod to that, but then after be like, no, like that's not going to happen kind of thing, right? Like it was kind of a fun moment. I found it hilarious, like their reactions to it. It was just like, but then they get attacked. And, you know, that's where sort of the first half of this episode, you know, it was very much just focusing on like, what do we do now? And it was sort of, you know, all this conflict of should we just leave them? All of a sudden there's a battle there and they hear the bell. So obviously they have to go back to Solaz Del Mar. And when they do that and they actually go back to Solaz Del Mar, it's like this huge battle. And so I will say, I think for the most part, there were a lot of really cool, you know, scenes in general. I think that the survivability and like the realistic part to it wasn't necessarily there. Like it did feel, first of all, it felt like a big battle. I will say that. Like it felt small in some scenes. It did feel like some stuff was really intentional, but it did feel for the most part like a really like legit, you know, cool battle. Like, you know, with the catapult going over and everything. The things that I didn't like were more of the battle scenes where it just seemed like Daryl was taking out people too easily, or, you know, there was a cut to like, you know, later in the day and it was just like noticeably darker out of nowhere. And that was like, I think just for the story, it was rushed there. Like, this is why 16 episodes would work so much better. Because if you look back to All Out War, and I can't believe I'm actually complimenting All Out War, but like the way they told stories there where it seemed like these characters were just surviving like this war, this and that. They were going from this place and they were out there battling. You know, this episode had some elements to that, but I think that's kind of what was missing, though, was like, you know, I guess the realistic part to it where this battle was taking all day and all night kind of thing. I think that that's kind of the issue here with this, is that it didn't necessarily feel like the battle was taking like that long. But I did like, you know, the scenes in general and like what did actually happen. I think Solaz Del Mar, you know, as a community is actually a really great community. And I actually do think it's one of my favorite communities of the last, like, however long, honestly. Like, I prefer that over like the Whisperer base, which wasn't really even a base at all anyways. I like Solaz Del Mar over any community, you know, in Dead City or like the Commonwealth. Like, it's a really cool community. A couple of things happen though during this battle where we do see Fede actually get hurt. You know, we see catapulting walkers. That is one thing as well. Like, the walkers are actually catapulted into the community, which was a very cool scene. Like, if I wasn't expecting all this stuff to happen, I would have been blown away by a lot of this, but I kind of expected this battle to happen at some point. I actually thought it was going to happen in like episode 2 or 3, but it happens here. I think that the whole layout of, you know, the sequences of the battle was perfect. I just think that there's little things in terms of the transitions from like this part of the battle to this part. That's really what I have an issue with for the most part, because it kind of felt rushed in certain areas, but the actual sequences were a lot of fun. Like, Fede got hurt at one point and he was really struggling throughout the battle there, but, you know, he's a leader of the community, or he's the leader of the community, and, you know, he really stood his ground there. And I really feel like this community could honestly, you know, be fine on their own. Like they fought back and they did it themselves. Like, yes, they did have the weapons and stuff from El Alcazar, but it's just, I don't know. I do have a lot of faith in the community, and I think that Fede has to learn that as well. And I think that's something that Roberto was trying to point out, like, what's the point of all of this here? And so let's talk about that. So the ending of the battle basically sort of gets to the point where, you know, I guess this new group here, you know, they take everyone out for the most part, and Roberto's struggling with, like, you know, is this even, you know, something that's worth it? Like, people are being taken away, and for what? Like, all of this just happened, right? And Fede is kind of like, well, you know, we're still here. We survived because of the weapons that we had. And I think Roberto being like, well, do you call this survival? And I get both sides to it. Personally, for me, I think that Fede just has to learn that, like, he can literally go out there and get, you know, a lot of the same weapons or whatever. I think that having an alliance makes a lot of sense, but I just think that it doesn't have to be obviously in the way that, you know, they're doing it right now. I think that they got to stand strong on their own, and they got to learn that somehow. I don't know how this is all, you know, going to play out. A lot of it, when you look back to The Walking Dead, is you have to take out, obviously, the community that is causing a lot of stuff. Like, as much as you want the alliances there, sometimes there's issues there, right? Like, if you look back to the Saviors, like, yes, they were all sort of aligned and everything, but the saviors were causing a lot of stuff. So you can't have that, right? You can't have bad leadership and like all these issues happening, because then people are going to start fighting back. And I think that that's the thing Daryl and Carol know. And I think that's why Daryl doesn't really want to get into everything here. Roberto, though, obviously just had enough and he just left. He literally left. And this is where I think a lot of the episode was just like, I don't know. I wasn't a big fan of like how they told a lot of this here, because it was rushed so fast. Like, Roberto literally found Justina, somehow found her, and then they got away. And there was an accident, and then both of them were taken. Like, that to me is just absolutely insane. Like, that happened so fast. And Daryl and Carol obviously found the vehicle with Antonio, because Antonio actually went with them. I feel like a lot of that, like, I get it, because the setup for episode 5 is now they have to find them. And obviously, I'll talk about the trailer, like, they do find them, it seems like. And we'll see where things go there. Daryl's going to be on a different mission. I'm really excited for that. I think that storyline is going to be exciting. But I just think the whole thing with this really, I don't know. I think that it could have played out a little bit more into episode 5. This is why, like, this amount of episodes just doesn't work, honestly. You need to have like 10 episodes or 12 or 16, like, you know what I mean? Because a lot of things happen like this where it's rushed so fast. And like, I get it, you're getting to certain points with the story, but like, I don't even think it makes the episode more exciting, to be honest. It's just like a lot of stuff happens and these moments almost feel a little bit more meaningless, you know? So to me, I actually think that, you know, the ending there, as much as I like sort of where they went, I think a lot of the scenes in general were just like, I don't even know what happened. I liked seeing Daryl, you know, on the bike at nighttime, and like obviously Carol and Antonio were in the vehicle. All those shots were really cool. It's just that I don't even know where they're really going next. And like the next episode's probably going to start off and it'll be like daytime or something. And like, you know what I mean? So overall, I did like this episode a lot. I loved the battle scenes. I liked a lot of the stuff early on. I just think that it kind of ended in a way that I wasn't the biggest fan of. I think that it was just a bit too rushed, but the battle sequence to me was really incredible. We're learning a lot about like Fede and Antonio. There's like some issues there. There's a lot of stuff that we're just learning about the characters. Pause, I will say, she's just kind of quiet. Like, she's there and she's helping out, but she's not really a part of, you know, the main cast as much as I thought she was going to be. I thought she was going to be like one of the main characters, but she's probably like the least, I would say, you know, in the scenes for the most part, because Roberto and Antonio are a big part of the story, Fede as well, and Justina. You know, Paz is kind of there, but she's not. Like, I actually wonder if she'll play a bigger role in season 4 if she does survive the season. I think she will, but I'm wondering if that's sort of the setup. Like, she's kind of there right now, but she's more set up for season 4. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, anyways, definitely post your thoughts down below. Hope you all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.